Hello, this is Ross at Oikos, and this is my fourth little lesson on using WordPress. We took a little diversion for lesson 3 and looked at how to embed some video because that was something that a client of mine had wanted to do. But this week, or this lesson, we're going to take a good look at the WordPress editing screen and some of the options that are available there and some of the things that are important to know about putting content into WordPress. So I have a new page screen that I have up at the moment, and we need to give this new page a title. So this is going to be called Using the Editor. So that's the title of our page, and then this box here, this is primarily what we're going to be looking at in this lesson, and specifically the things along this bar, and some important tips about adding content. So the content editor mostly works just like something like Microsoft Word, so I can type in the editor in WordPress works mostly like a word processor such as MS Word. So if you've used Microsoft Word, most of these buttons and concepts will be familiar to you. So for example, we can click the bold button, and that will turn the word WordPress bold, and we can underline things. Actually, I can't underline just yet. Actually, I can make that italic. I'll show you how to underline in just a moment. And we don't like this sentence, so we're going to cross that out by clicking the strike through button. So all fairly familiar stuff. We can create lists. So if I click the list button, this is a list item. This is another list item, and there's also buttons that allow us to create sublists, but they also aren't around just yet, but I'll show you in a moment just where that option is. We can create numbered lists as well, and you'll notice that as I hover over these buttons that little descriptions of them pop up so we can see easily what they do. We can create a quote. I can't think of any quotes off the top of my head now. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. A favourite quote of mine, and I can highlight that and I can click block quote, and that will turn that into a quote, and that will appear differently to other text on the screen. You'll notice that when I press return, it continues the quote, and I need to undo the block quote button in order to get back over to the far left hand side and start typing normally again. We can of course center our text, and we can align it to the right using those buttons as well. And we can create links. So WordPress, if I click the link button here, I can type in a web address to go to, or I can copy and paste that from my web browser. Let's go to wordpress.org, and that's good. So I can give it a title as well, and that gives you a little pop-up. I'll put that in so you can see what that does. WordPress website. I've also got an option to open that in a new window or tab, but most of the time you won't use that. So that's now gone blue and underlined as well as being bold, showing that that's a link, and I can remove the link just by clicking this unlink button here. The insert more tag I'll come back to in a later lesson when I talk about excerpts and more tags. There is a spell checker, so I can just click that and it will quickly it will underline anything that's misspelt. So this is misspelt here, and if I word process that, it did actually underline that. Sometimes your web browser will underline something, and if I right click on the misspelt word, then it will come back with some suggestions and I can get that corrected. Perfect. This button here I won't show you, but it toggles a full screen mode where it makes the editor take up your whole screen or your whole web browser. And then We've talked about a few things like underlining and creating sublists, and it's not clear at the moment how you do those, and that's because there is another set of useful options in what WordPress jokingly calls the kitchen sink. And if I click this button, I get a whole new row of buttons and options that I can use, and some of these are really important, and I don't know why they hide them away. It's really important when you're editing in WordPress to make sure that you use heading styles to break your content into different sections. So I'm going to give this a title. I'll just say this is how to use the editor. And then I can select the line or the text, or just have the cursor in the line. And if I choose a style from here, so if I choose heading 1, that gives me a nice big heading. Usually heading 1 is reserved for the title of the page, in this case using the editor up here. So I'm going to make this heading 2, so it's slightly smaller. And then progressively the headings get smaller and smaller, and these will all be styled as part of your theme. So if I do lists, I can make that heading 3, and that's great. There are other styles here as well, so we can, paragraph is the standard style that most of your text will be in. We can have addresses if we're writing code or things where the characters need to be fixed width. There's a pre-formatted option, and there are 6 different heading styles that you can use. Now I said that we can underline, which is true, so we can underline that. We can align full, which is like a justification type thing. Doesn't do much for any of that particular paragraph, but if you've got a big lot of text, you can justify that. We can change the text color if you want to. I wouldn't recommend doing that. That should all be done by the styles in your theme, but if you wanted to make text red, for example, we can click on that and we can make that text red. I'll come back to these 2 buttons in just a moment, and this is remove formatting, so that if I click on a word, then that will remove formatting from it. We can insert custom characters. There's a whole load of other different characters and symbols that we can put in. So if you're looking for something with an accent maybe, or a tick, or a symbol that you can't get to from the keyboard, then there's a lot of symbols in there that you can make use of. So if I'm writing something in French, I can have my little A with an accent, and that's inserted that there so you can see. So that's a useful little button sometimes, especially if you're doing international writing. And then we talked about sublists and indenting as well. You can do that, create a new paragraph here. This is an indented paragraph. And if I click this button here, that will indent, and I can indent multiple times, and I can also go back the other way and unindent. This also works for sublist items. So if I've got a list item and I click right, then that will actually turn it into a sublist item there. I've got an undo, so if I've made a change, I can undo it, and I can, once I've undone, I can redo, and then there's some help on the editor as well. Before we go, I just want to quickly touch on cutting and pasting and what these 2 buttons here do. If you are copying and pasting text from another program or from a web page that already exists, when you paste that into this editor, it will end up being quite messy, and it's quite important that you keep to the styles that are set within your web page. So what we like to do, and what is good practice to do, is to remove as much formatting as possible and then reapply the styles from the WordPress editor. So to demonstrate that, I'm just going to go to, where shall I go? Let's go to the BBC News site. Taking a while to load this morning. And what we'll do is we will take this news item here along with all its formatting, and we will copy it, and we will think that's pretty good, that'll just paste nicely into our site. So I'm going to paste it in here, and that's not been too bad. It's actually not added in too much extra formatting, and it's managed to keep our links as well. So that's reasonably good, but this picture is probably a bit crazy, and this is doing some funny stuff with the links. So just to demonstrate the difference, I'm going to I'll click the undo button to undo that paste, and then I'm going to do this button here, which is paste as plain text. And what that will do is that will strip all the formatting from what I've got copied. So I'm going to follow these instructions here, use Control-V on your keyboard to paste text, or I can right click and go paste, and we can see that that then gives us just the plain text. And I need to just do a little bit of work here to reformat this. Let's see how it looked. So just tidied that up a bit, and that will paste that in as plain text. I can then do some reformatting. I can turn this back into a list properly. That's all good. There's a spare paragraph in there, and in there, and then we can just create this as a heading. So this is really good because, especially if you're pasting from another system, it seems to have worked quite well from the BBC, but from other websites and other systems, you may get spurious formatting in here that you don't want, and that will mess up your pages. So that's good practice. The other button is a paste from Word button, and that will attempt to convert any Microsoft Word formatting into proper WordPress type formatting. So those two buttons are really useful, and do try and remember to use them if you're copying and pasting text, and do try and put in that little bit of extra effort to format things correctly and to use the drop down styles here. So that's good. So there's some good tips on using the WordPress editor. We'll come back and look at these buttons up here for inserting media at another time, and yeah, hope that's useful. Thanks for listening.